Listen, not everybody has cabling in the walls in their house. That's just the way it is. And it can be super expensive and super time consuming to run those cables later. And a lot of times it just isn't worth it. But that does not mean that you can't take advantage of some of the great features that Unifi has to offer. And today I'm going to show you a setup that you guys can use in your house when you don't have the cabling in the wall to do that. So let's get started. Now, in the past, I have to admit, when it came to a wireless mesh network, Unifi was never my first choice. I mean, it just really never seemed to work as well as I would hope. Yes, you got to take advantage of a lot of the advanced features like firewalls and VLANs. However, to get there, you sacrifice speed. Like cut your speed in half sort of sacrifice, which really sucks. And then just taking care of your equipment, running firmware updates and things like that was temperamental at best. And so it just was never my first choice. There just were so many other options out there that you could choose to get those great speeds when you didn't have cabling in the walls. However, I've seen some pretty big improvements in this area when they introduced the new U7 line. Now, are you going to get gigabit speeds over the mesh? I don't know. And in all fairness, I haven't been able to test it using like iPerf or one of those tools like that. But with the setup I'm going to show you today, I did consistently get over 400 megabits per second over the wireless mesh pretty consistently. And let's be honest, you could run a lot of stuff in your house over those kind of speeds. Now, the other thing I didn't like about the previous versions of Unifi Mesh was that with the remote AP, typically you had to power them on using a power injector, and those setups with the wires and everything can look janky. I mean, they just can. There's no real nice, clean way to do it. However, the setup I'm going to show you today really does clean it up and makes everything look really nice. So we get improved performance and nice aesthetics. It's the best of both worlds. We're going to be creating our wireless mesh today, starting out with the new UDR7 router. And we're going to mesh it to a UX7 Express router. Now, this setup not only works really, really well, but as you'll see, it looks quite a bit nicer too. Plus, it has the huge added bonus that on the remote side of things, you can physically connect other devices to your network because the UX7 has ports on the back of it, which allow you to extend your wireless connectivity and physically connect devices on the remote end. Huge bonus and a great aspect of this setup today. So we're going to be starting on the Dream Router 7 side of the house. Now our Dream Router 7 is completely configured, it's completely set up. We're not going to be doing that as part of today's video. However, if you would like to see how this is set up, I do have a video where I walk through everything step by step, from the networks to the Wi-Fi, even the firewall rules are all done step by step in that video. It makes a great starting point for your network if you're planning on getting into this type of unit. And again, I want to reiterate, for the setup we're talking about today, I really like the Dream Router 7 as your main device. It's because it's both a router and your control plane, and it has a built-in switch, and it does Wi-Fi. It really makes a great option for this setup that we're going to go through today. Now, for the UX7, we're going to adopt this device as an access point. Now, let's talk about that for a second. The UX7 is kind of unique in that it can be a router control plane device just like the Dream Router 7. However, it can also be adopted as an access point. So for today's setup, we're not going to be setting up the UX7 as a separate device. We're not going to log into it, log into our Unifi account on it, any of that stuff. All we're going to do is plug it in and it will show up as an access point to adopt inside the Dream Router 7. So our Dream Router 7 is the only device that's going to be actually set up and logged into the Unifi account directly. Any changes we make to the network we'll make in the UDR7, and those changes will propagate down to the UX7 just like a standard AP works, okay? So the first thing we need to do is get this UX7 ready to adopt. Now the way to do this is super easy. All we need to do is plug it in. That's all you got to do. Give it power, let it boot up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then you will see it show up in here as a device that's ready to adopt. One quick setting I want to point out is that you want wireless meshing turned on. They're going to mesh together, so we need to make sure meshing is turned on. That's done over in the settings gear. Then go up to Wi-Fi, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see wireless meshing is enabled, so make sure that's enabled on your side so the two can discover each other. All right, let me go power this thing on. All right, so here you go. So we popped over, and just to kind of show you where we're at, so here's the main dashboard. We're gonna go into Unifi Devices, and you can see Express 7 has showed up and is ready to adopt. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that just like it was an access point and not a router, which is kind of cool. So we'll go ahead and adopt this. All right, so now it's adopted. Now it does take a little bit longer. It is doing that wirelessly. There's no physical cables plugged into this, but I will note here that you can use the Express 7 as a wired AP. You don't have to do it wirelessly in a mesh. So hypothetically, for the other half of the people who do have cables in their house, you could set one of these in your office, physically connect it into the backbone of the network, and treat it as Wi-Fi for your office without having it mounted to a wall or a ceiling or something like that, just using a standard wall jack. So it works both ways. Now you see we have an update. We're not gonna go ahead, we don't need to do that right now as part of this video, but eventually I will go ahead and update the device. But you can see it is just showing up as a wireless device. I can rename the device as, say, kitchen or something. Okay, so we'll go do that. We'll just call this kitchen AP. Right? We can adjust our settings just like all our Wi-Fi settings. This does have the 6 gigahertz band, which is really, really great. I think it allows some of those speeds that we're seeing on the speed test, which we'll get to in here in a little bit. You can see that we're on channel 3.6 and we have great signal. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply changes. I do find that no matter which AP you're using, when you make changes, and it's a wireless mesh, they do typically take a little bit longer to make those changes. However, in general, it's still not too bad of a process. Now, something I wanted to point out here too that I really, really like that they do with this, and I think I have to wait for it to adopt, but let me show you the signal reader here in just a second. Okay, there we go. So you can see right here, you got this nice little signal reader that's telling you how good the signal is to its parent device. It says it's meshing. I mean, you get a nice visual display. This is also something that was missing in previous iterations with wireless meshing. You really didn't know how good a signal. You were kind of playing a guessing game. If you got slow speeds, you weren't really sure if it was because of this or something else. So as you kind of find the perfect location for your UX7 in your house, you get a nice meter to use, which is great. Going back over to the UX7, you also get the signal indicator on the device itself. Now this is kind of a game changer when it comes to finding the best place in your house to put your wireless mesh AP. And so as you kind of go pick some different outlets and some different locations, you'll have an immediate signal indicator as to how good the signal strength is back to your main unit. And so I just think that makes this setup stand out. Now remember, any access point that you buy from Ubiquiti allows you to wirelessly mesh them. Although you need the power injector aspect of it, so it's not as clean a setup, and they don't have the little digital display on the front that's going to give you this additional information. So it's another reason I really, really like this particular setup for doing wireless meshing over using standard access points from Ubiquiti. All right, so I want to get into the testing aspect of this. Now that we have it set up, and I know I don't have the update run, that's okay. That's not really going to affect this at all. I want to do something, a couple things specifically in the interface here to allow us to test. Now I'm going to run 4 different speed tests, and I am going to be using speedtest.net for this. We can try fast.com and some of the other ones too. However, I realize that speedtest.net is not the way to go about doing this. However, my house is under construction right now, so my iPerf server and everything is kind of packed away right now, and I did not get it out specifically for this video. So please don't beat me up in the comments too bad for using something like speedtest. I realize that it is not a perfect test. It's not even close because of the fluctuations. However, it's gonna give us a pretty good indication of what we're trying to show here today. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Now, in order to do this, we're going to run 4 different tests. I'm going to physically connect my laptop into the DDR7. run a test. Then I'm going to physically connect my laptop into the UX7 and run a test. Then I want to do a wireless test. Now, in order to do this, I need to be able to force my laptop to choose one device or the other. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into my home Wi-Fi network here. And right now it's just set to broadcast and work on anything, but I'm going to go ahead and change this so it only broadcasts on the Dream Router 7, okay? So now if I connect to this home Wi-Fi network, home Wi-Fi 7 network, it's only going to broadcast here, and I'm forcing my computer to connect to this device. All right, so we'll go ahead and apply changes. Now, while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and create one more new Wi-Fi network, and we're going to call this UX7 only Wi-Fi. All right, just give it a password. All right, we don't care about the network right now. I'm not going to adjust any of the other settings, just leave everything as default. We're not going to be roaming around or doing anything, but I am going to choose the UX7 specifically on this one for this Wi-Fi network. So then when I connect to this one, I know that I'm connected to our remote AP, and that's going to allow us to do our test. Now, this is all stuff you don't need to do if you're at your house. This is only for today's video, so you don't have to do these things. Typically, you're going to want all your networks broadcasting on all of your devices at the same time. This is something specific to today's test. All right, so let's get into our speed test now. Now, we are physically connected into the UDR7 router, okay? I'll just show you here, we have a physical Ethernet connection in there of up to 1 gig, which is typically fine for speed tests at my house. We have the Wi-Fi turned off, so this isn't going to be an accidental Wi-Fi speed test. We are specifically connecting the LAN speed connected into the Dream Router 7. Now, at my house, I typically get between 300 and 450 on my speed test. I have T-Mobile 5G, which again adds another layer of flexibility as far as my speed tests go, but let's just see what we get sort of as our baseline here. Okay, looking good. So we're pulling a little bit over 400, which is awesome. That's a pretty good day for our house, which I like seeing. Upload, we're usually around 50, give or take. I think that's kind of where T-Mobile's at, is 50 meg upload, so we're getting our full upload speed, which is great. All right, so there's our speed test. We pulled 420 down, 51 up. That's awesome. That's what we're going to kind of use as our baseline here as we kind of keep going through the test. And let's see how the next one goes. Let's continue with our testing. So now I'm physically plugged into the UX7 Express. You can see we have our connection here, and we're going to run another speed test. Now, before we do, there's one downside to using this particular setup if you want devices physically connected to the UX7, and that is I cannot assign VLANs to those ports. They don't even show up as assignable ports in the interface. I can only assign physical VLANs to my Dream Router 7. If I come up here, there is no UX7 to choose. That's what we get, unfortunately. So I definitely see that as a downside. However, if you're using one of the, the regular access points, they don't even have ports you can use anyway. So I still see it as a benefit, but it is a benefit that has some limitations. So I wanted to make sure we called that out here. So let's go ahead and run our speed test. Okay, 333, not too bad. Again, could be some of the fluctuations of T-Mobile, could be the fact that I'm on my mesh. However, just pointing out, let's call a spade here, 300 megs is still plenty fast to do things on. So, I'm not disappointed with that result at all. You can see down here, it's, good for browser quality, good for gaming, good for streaming quality. And I'm physically connected to our remote device, which is really, really nice. So let's move over into our wireless test. So I've re-enabled the Wi-Fi on my laptop. You can see that we're connected to home Wi-Fi 7 network, which is only broadcasting on our Dream Router 7. We're going to go ahead and just verify that though. If I come down in here, you can see that my MacBook here is connected to the Dream Router 7. Also, I have a newer iPhone, which I think has it has Wi-Fi 7 into it. So being that these are both Wi-Fi 7 wireless devices, I'm going to run some wireless speed tests for you guys on both of these.
you can see that, yeah, the laptop is older, and so it's connected on Wi-Fi 5 AC, but my iPhone is connected on Wi-Fi 7. So let's kind of give you a little bit of a flavor there from our Wi-Fi test and go ahead and run that. All right, so there's our results. As you can see, older hardware does run a little bit slower on the Wi-Fi, but with using a Wi-Fi 7 device like my iPhone, I was pulling still really good speeds on both of them. Nothing to shake a stick at, pretty easy to run your household off those type of speeds. I'm just getting closer to max speed over Wi-Fi on my Wi-Fi 7 device. So now let's change how we're connected, and we'll go run the test again. This time we'll be connected to the UX7 directly. All right, so let's go ahead and do our last test here. I have the MacBook connected to the UX7 AP. As you can see, we are connected to this Wi-Fi network, which is great. I will say that the Wi-Fi in my older laptop is kind of slow. So again, we'll be doing the speed test on 2 different devices to give you a little bit more of a flavor. I've never really been impressed with the Wi-Fi on this thing, but let's run our test here. So we're gonna go over into speed test here and run that. Now, as I'm getting this pulled up here, one thing I want to call out and just make sure I highlight so it's clear, and that is the VLANs aspect. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that the physical ports on the back don't allow you to do different VLANs. However, I don't want that to be misconstrued as that you can't do VLANs on this device. You're just restricted to doing those VLANs over the Wi-Fi only. So you can still create Wi-Fi networks and put them on different VLANs, and it will work in this situation. So I don't want to confuse anybody about that, especially if you're learning Unifi for the first time. It's just a restriction for the physical ports being plugged in the back. So if you're using this in the office, whatever you plug in the back is going to pull an IP address from that default network. It's not my favorite thing, but ultimately probably something most of us could live with. All right, so let's get over to our speed test. All right, so our speed tests were 130 and 330 respectively. Again, part of that is just the fact that I'm doing some testing on an older laptop. You can see on the newer device speeds were much faster. Now in the old days, you could cut the speed in half. If we ran 400, you'd be lucky to get 150, 180. It just almost cut your speed in half. However, you can see that on the cell phone, I'm getting almost full speeds while connected to this remote device, which I think is a huge improvement from where things are. Obviously, we have Wi-Fi 7 technology being used to our benefit here versus my laptop, which has an old Wi-Fi adapter in it. So again, results may vary based off of your setup, your equipment and everything, but ultimately, I really do like this setup. All right, so just wanted to share some final thoughts here, guys. Ultimately, when you're looking at doing this, if you don't have wires in your home, but you want to be able to take advantage of a lot of the great things that Unifi has to offer with VLANs and firewall rules and just a lot of those security protocols, this particular setup, the UDR7 and the UX7 make a great option. We're seeing good speeds. Both are Wi-Fi 7 devices. Both have 2.5 gigabit ports on the back, so if you are using the physical connections, you're going to be able to take advantage of that. Both of them have 10 gig connection uplinks on them, so you can do up to 10 gig on either device. Maybe not exactly in this scenario. I don't know that if I plugged into the 10 gig port on the UX7, if I would get 10 gig speeds versus the 2.5 gig port. However, I don't even have the equipment to be able to really test that at all. Now, one other little note here that I'll do is you could also get this same nice clean setup and a lot of the same benefits just by using 2 UX7s. You don't have to throw in the Dream Router. The nice thing about the Dream Router is it has more switch ports on the back. It's going to be able to do some small Unifi Protect applications, and some of the other apps that Unifi offers. So it is going to give you a little bit more capability from a ubiquity standpoint. However, this same setup, this same testing, the hardware in them from a Wi-Fi standpoint and how fast they run is virtually identical between the two. They're very, very similarly spec'd out. So you just get a little bit more of the Unifi ecosystem with the Dream Router 7. However, throwing two of these UX7s together in a room or in a house, you're going to get very similar results, I would expect. So ultimately, guys, if you don't have cables, take a look at this setup. I think you'll really like it. Hopefully this helps you. Thank you for putting up with me and watching my videos. I really, really appreciate the support here, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll see you guys down the road in a future video. Thanks.